Welcome to our first discussion with VRTogether. This is our first roundtable discussion. We'll be having more episodes coming out, so make sure you subscribe and stay tuned. Sign up for updates via our email list. I'll include the link below to stay up to date with everything that our studio has going on. First, we're going to start with some introductions. First up is our founder and CEO, Richard Hoagland.
Hi.
Next is our XR developer, Ben Visser. We have Steph, Keegan, our project manager and artist, and myself, Maggie, Akins, director of community. So to kick off, Richard, this question's coming to you first. Tell us a little bit about the founding and evolution of VRTogether.
It actually got started back in the early days of the reemergence of virtual reality, which dates back to about 2013, 2014. And new headsets came out that were, I don't know, they kind of the first time for a reasonable price offered this opportunity to actually go into a virtual world. And I started developing and experimenting in that world at that time, along with a lot of other people who are trying to wrap their heads around like a VR headset that you put on your face. And what does that mean when you go into a virtual space? So in 2015, I led a small team on a game called Daydream Blue. And a couple of really interesting things came out of it that we frankly didn't expect. It was a multiplayer game, so people could connect together and hang out. And there was like a campfire and some games. There's a pet robot that you could like play tennis with and tell it to jump. So it's just like a relaxing space to go. And we would get responses from folks about things like hanging out with their sibling who lived far away. Not that we said you should do this, but like one person had said they lived quite far north in Canada, and like they used it because it helped with seasonal affective disorder because there was just a lot of darkness. So I don't know, it's just like an eye-opening experience about the power of virtual reality in terms of improving kind of the quality of life of an individual. So somewhere along the lines around 2020, all these ideas had kind of been in place, or like interesting things had happened. So then COVID happened, and everybody went into lockdown. And I started researching isolation and loneliness around, because there was this interesting thing about physical, or the feeling of connection and co-presence across distance in virtual reality. So like, is this an interesting way to potentially provide a feeling of connection? Because at the time, like everybody's physical distance. So I'm talking to my mom on the phone all the time. Like we lived in the same town, but we weren't actually too much spending time together at all. And so we started doing research and got funding from the National Science Foundation and started collaborating with researchers at academic institutions to look at this question of like co-presence and feeling of connection across distance in virtual reality. And then fast forward, so as to not take up the whole time with the story, but over the next 5 years now, wow. It's really morphed into this idea of just building virtual reality applications that improve health and wellness. But because I think for all of us in the team, the importance of gaming as well, like we're all love games. So doing it in a way that's also really fun to do, like whatever it is, like make it a fun game, but also have positive outcomes come out of it. Is what it's morphed into. Is like now the clear idea of it is something that is enjoyable, that improves quality of life.
So this next question will be for Steph and Ben, kind of going back to, our core mission and kind of what brings us all together. We are all gamers. I think we're all really passionate about games bringing people together. And we'll start with you, Steph, and Ben, you'll get the same question. What brought you to VRTogether? Kind of what drew you into working with Richard in the studio?
I've actually known Richard for about 10 years now, and even longer actually. And I was working in VR as well on games, and that's how we became friends. But what drew me to working with him was that he cares about VR and he cares about people. And I've done talks in the past about what the good that VR can do. A lot of people are quite negative with technologies when they're new, and sorry, my cats are
You're fine.
Apologies if there's any weird noises. A lot of people can be quite down on it. And early days of VR, people were very keen to criticize it and show pictures of CEOs in suits frowning in devices and saying that it didn't look like a lot of fun. No one looked like they were doing, like, it had this kind of evil connotation. But I wasn't seeing that. I was seeing the early days of jumping into VR chat and connecting with people I didn't get to connect with in real life, and sitting around a campfire and talking with people who I wouldn't have the opportunity to talk to before. And sitting with, like, I met some teenagers from the Bronx recently and just talked about our lives. We have very different lives. And it was really, I don't get to do, when else am I ever going to get to do that? Mm-hmm. And then my grandmother, who found it hard to get around, putting her in a headset and seeing what the world that she could no longer see. So I felt like there was a lot of opportunity for VR to do good, and also love games. And so the right combination of games, focus, and doing good in the world was like the draw for me.
Ben, same question.
Yeah. So I think I'd be in a similar vein to Steph. There's something really nice about creating something meaningful that goes just beyond creating a game. There seems to be a kind of like a strong pointer towards, creating meaningful connection with people. And that was a definite draw card for me.
So going back to the scientific research that you mentioned and something that drew me in, one of our main key points of VRTogether is combining scientific research and game design to create these games for flourishing. I would love for you to speak a little bit to the importance and maybe some highlights of research that we've done and the importance of that to the game studio.
So kind of unintentionally, I was always hovering around games and research. A lot of it was because when I started a game development studio with another person out of college, we didn't know what we were doing. And we built a game, and then people were like, hey, if you'll build us a game, we'll pay you. And I was like, okay, this is great. We need money. So those ended up being a lot of things in like the educational space. So the university in town in Lexington, and then Kentucky Educational Television, which is educational television. We made some ads for them. And it was really interesting to see like the challenges that go in, because from the outside, it looks really easy. Like, hey, why don't you just make fun games? Because let's face it, a lot of times when your focus is something like research, like sometimes the games aren't so fun. And then, but then on the other side, it's like, oh, well, you all make fun games. Why don't you just make them like, so they help people? And I mean, like, I'm really simplifying this, but then like it turns out it's really, really hard to make a fun game. And it's really hard to make a game that has impacts or outcomes. And so like, okay, now you're trying to do both these really hard things. But if you do, it just seems like this is this really open-ended opportunity. And you even see it like being recognized in the National Institutes of Health in US, some of the things that they're doing is starting to have conferences on. You've got the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, that has, I think it was in 2017, they had the first therapeutic approved that was a video game. That kind of was the starting place. And it's specifically about like why combine them is to make sure that we are doing what we say we do. So like we can make something fun and people can say it's fun, but how do we with our expertise evaluate whether it is in fact, say, helping with reducing a condition? That's where the research part comes in, and we can bring in experts and we can work with them for them to help us understand like what do we want to foster, what are the outcomes we want, and then also how do we actually measure that and know that we're on the right track. So I mentioned the National Science Foundation grant that we had that was a bit more like basic research into people connecting people in virtual reality. We had people playing games, and we had people playing games in real life. So they did an activity where they actually handed objects back and forth in a room together. And then they went to separate rooms and handed virtual versions of those objects back and forth. And the whole time they were geez, I might get this wrong, but
Okay.
there was I think it was EEG. So there's a number of physiological like data points that we were collecting, and then surveys, and we were just saying like, how much is it similar? Like, is it actually register in the body when you exchange an object in a virtual world in a way that is similar to the real world? And it's been a while. I wish I could spout up like that exactly all of the findings. But one of the things that was really interesting was like participation in gaming felt very satisfying and enjoyable, and felt like there was a connection there in virtual reality. So now we have VR Singing Club, and that came from a grant from the National Institute of Aging, looking at music and specifically singing. Well, no, it's music and singing and game-like activities. And this is where actually, like, at one point we can have Amanda, Dr. Glegg, or somebody from the research team to come on because I always have to ask about these questions, like the correct terminology. But I think it's to improve the quality of life with individuals who are suffering from dementia. So if, promoting singing a song in a social nature, so they can't leave their house, but putting it in a club, so perhaps they could sing with 3 or 4 other people in a virtual world, doing an activity together, and doing that to improve their quality of life. There's a lot of research that says that basically if you have cognitive activity, physical activity, and social engagement, you significantly kind of delay the onset of, or you live healthier longer. And so wherever you may have the propensity or likelihood of developing dementia, you can essentially kind of push that back and have a healthier life for longer before something may start to arise, like some cognitive impairment. Yeah. And so we bring in those experts, and they can help us understand, like, what do we actually what should we build? Because it's not just about fun; it also has to have those outcomes too. Yeah. And then how do we measure that? That it's also really hard when you're doing research. It's great because we're collecting data, and we're working with a center specifically that does Alzheimer's research, and they have a host of older adults that are willing to participate in research, and they can really guide us through the process of understanding how to do it right. But it's really small numbers, and it's hard to judge, like, what does that look like if you were to put that out into the world? And so that's also part of, like, putting applications out in the world, and the gaming and the fun part of it. It's like, okay, now it looks like we are on the right track for outcomes, but basically, even if it has outcomes, they have to do it. And to do it, you really want them to like doing it, because people are very likely to stop something if they don't like it. So if it's fun, if it's a game, like, people go to games because they love them. So that's the magic of that part of it.
And, I want to shift away a little bit from us talking about research. Thank you for going into that, into the enjoyment. One of, the app that we've released this year, VR Singing Club, is all about sparking joy, connection, wonder. And one of our big releases this year was Sleigh Songs, which was a winter immersive wonderland experience. You hop in your sleigh with 3 other players, and you get to carol through an incredible landscape filled with shooting stars, characters, critters, all sorts of holiday themes. So I wanted to ask, and this is really open for all of y'all, what sparked joy for you in creating that winter experience, and what were some challenges as well in creating it?
Honestly, the hardest thing in VR is always the same answer. It's the most boring answer because it's always the same, but the hardest thing is the hardware, dealing with the limitations and trying to optimize, and you always have these huge ambitions. And so the biggest friction at the beginning was Richard had this, like, really clear vision of what he wanted to do, and I can honestly say I was like, we can't do that. That's not going to happen. I couldn't believe that we would pull it off, but we did, and I was really I'm so happy that I was wrong. But so it's always the hardware, always optimizing. but what really sparked me joy was the first time, even when it was Ray Box's first time singing Mariah Carey All I Want for Christmas, and seeing things happen in the world at the time the lyrics were mentioning them. It just made me really happy. And I'm not the biggest fan of Christmas in general, but it got me in the spirit, and it was only like October, and I was just like, oh boy, this is great. This is what we should be doing. So that for me is like my takeaway from the experience making it.
Yeah, I loved all the interactive elements. I'm literally thinking of when you drive underneath the mistletoe, and it coincides right with the lyrics, as well as all of the synced elements too. I thought it was just really creative and really connects you with the music and what you're singing too. So I really loved that. Ben, what about you?
There was a bit of a ongoing technical issue of just getting everything synced up. So I don't know, from the outside, it might not even appear to be something, but having the music going and then having people singing at the same time with the singer itself all being in the same step, that was quite memorable, I guess I would put it. Like there was quite a bit to that. It was cool to work on something where by the time we got to the end of it, we were kind of seeing it all come together. It was cool to see that happen, like to see what the final experience was and to come along for the ride for that. So yeah, like there were some big problems in it. And I'm not really speaking to the technicalities of how we got past that. Yeah, there's a bit of sleep lost over that aspect.
I know, I can imagine.
I love about working in a singing app is that, I mean, we all have bad days at work, right? We all have days where we get out the wrong side of the bed, and the thought of sitting in front of a computer all day does not fill us with joy. But you cannot play test your work and not sing along when it's a singing app. It's just so, even if you're in the worst mood, it just happens. You're singing, before you catch yourself, you're singing, 100%. And then your mood is so much better. It's made my mental health a lot better, just having a little sing song at work every day. It's been fantastic.
I know.
So I think that's a really unexpected outcome.
So, but then it's like, okay, but then we like, because as creatures, like I'll take me as an example and going to the gym, or rock climbing. Like I love it when I do it and the results are fantastic, but then I'll just stop for a month. So like coming back to fun, it is an open kind of question challenge, which is like, I agree, I can't sing well, but I feel like when I'll start singing because I'm play testing, and then it seems like if I sing a song, like I'm in a better mood, and I know that, but I still don't sing enough. So it's like, can we make something fun and enjoyable enough that because I think that's the thing, like with kind of wellness, health and wellness is, can we get it so that they're going to sing the same way that, like with another game, I'm going because I want to do another run to like try to get to the boss. I'm giving away some of the games I play. But because it was surprising, because also when we started with the research, like we just had a bunch of other data. We had and this is something I've learned about the process. If somebody's in academia, like, oh yeah, I know this, but like a literature review, like we had all this literature out there that was what we used to essentially to propose our to talk about, to argue for why our hypothesis is basically worthy of exploration, i.e. getting some funding from, because this is the funding we're getting is from the National Institute of Health. So they do want outcomes. It's not enough to be fun. They want outcomes to it. But you don't know. You're like, you put together the argument for it, but you don't know. And it is exciting, even if it's just personal anecdotal evidence, to be like, you like singing. It's hard not to be in a little better mood after you sing a song. maybe with some songs, like there's some songs that are pretty sad, so that you could argue that like they're not going to put you in a better mood. But
Yeah. I mean, I think incentivizing people to participate in wellness consistently is something that you see across, I mean, the whole wellness industry, you know, tech, real life, all of it. I mean, I know for myself, I've downloaded how many trackers and streaks, you know, apps that I'm like, okay, if I go to the gym, like, you know, X days in a row, I get, you know, a reward. Even though we know it's good for us, you know, even without that reward. So I definitely think that that is a big challenge in creating these games, and kind of goes back again to what we're saying of, you know, we want it to be wellness focused but also fun and engaging, and we want people to see, you know, this is something you're doing for yourself, and it's you know, engaging with the community too. That's definitely a challenge. So
sometimes I think we just, oh, sorry.
no,
I was just saying, sometimes I think we should just not tell people about the wellness part. And and if we make a fun game, then they'll come back and keep playing it. It'll just happen to also do X and Y. Because like as soon as you tell me I should do something because it's good for me, then I'll be like, I'll probably pass on that.
The Pokemon Go model, everyone suddenly, there's all these people who lost tons of weight because they were walking to Pokemon gyms.
Oh my gosh, yes.
They got really fit, and we just want to do it that way.
That is so accurate. 100. It's like sneaking vegetables into like mac and cheese. You know, it's like it's healthy for you, but it also tastes good. So I wanted to ask Richard, what were some challenges in releasing Sleigh songs? You know, that was a big lift for the team and executed beautifully. And kind of lessons learned going into 2025. You know, encompassing kind of what we've discussed.
It was fun and it was a lot of work. I think the biggest thing, and this is for a lot of folks, is how do you get people to know about something you're doing? Yeah. So it's, and this has been, I think this is true for a lot of folks that do things in gaming. A lot of things that, I mean, they talk about things like the attention economy. There's a lot of industries that all have the same question, which is there's so much out there. There's so much people are talking about all the time. How do you talk about what you're doing, and how do you get, I think there's a few ways to take it. One is like, how do you get people's attention? Mm-hmm. Another way would be like, how do you find the people who would be interested, who would be interested in what you have to say? So there were a lot of technical challenges that we faced in the process, and then there were challenges with once we had the application, how do we have people find out about it? And a lot of what we did. So if anyone has, for the folks who have followed what we've been doing for the past year, we released a very, very early version of the app, VR Singing Club, in June. And Sleigh Songs was our first attempt at building an immersive singing experience that was kind of built on the base, the foundation. But one of the reasons we did it very early was because frankly, we were trying to figure out the answers to those questions. I think our lesson was that we really need to put a lot of thought and effort into that question of like, how do we reach the people who we believe would be interested in what we're doing and what we have to say. And then there was just a technical challenge. We did it very fast. So from a development time frame, it was a very small amount of time. It was maybe 3 months, which might seem like a lot, but from a development standpoint, that's a very, very short amount of time, depending on what you're doing. On the other hand, I would say like the thing that we on the exciting, optimistic side is that it did seem to work. Like there's something interesting about immersive singing experience and providing something like that. And I think that was part of the process that I feel like got us to even better understanding of what we are talking about, games for flourishing. Mm-hmm. So that was a positive outcome of it.
So we've talked a lot about what we've done in 2024, from research to Winter Wonderland. So I'd love to pose this question to our devs. Ben, you can go first. As we're looking forward into 2025, what are you excited about working on as part of the studio, as part of VR Together? And then also please share some advice that you would give to devs that are looking to get into the VR space.
So I guess from the perspective of VR Together, what I'm looking for is an engaged audience, so people who are interested in what we're doing, and that they're having positive outcomes as a result of using the technology that we're creating.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've done pretty well with VR Singing Together in terms of what we've made there, but the next steps may be something different. I think that's something as a company that we're discovering at the moment. In terms of advice that I would give to developers who might be looking to get into the development space, I guess it would be just to try and listen to everyone around you, listen to the things they're saying, listen to the things they're not saying, and just try and figure out what the best step forward is. It's very ambiguous. That would be my advice.
Awesome. Steph, same question for you.
Well, I'm pretty psyched about the future of VR. And just this week we've been having some pretty interesting conversations with all the VR devs, and the gaming industry has been it's probably been one of the worst times in the gaming industry ever. People are comparing it to the Atari crash at the moment for indie devs, and so it's a really hard time to be a games developer right now. But VR has always been in this valley of like waiting for it to take off, and yet it survived. And it seems as though the general consensus from internally is that VR is really solid and things are getting better, and there is a lot of interesting opportunities in VR. I'm excited about the creativity of our team, the freedom that Richard gives us to explore ideas, and the kind of the platform we're being given to be creative as devs and try things out. So that it's a luxury, and I feel very, very privileged every day that I get to do it. And then what I would say to younger, like a year ago me, or even young devs, is find your other devs. Like there's strength in community in VR, and you just have to network and find your people. It's the one thing that has kept me in work for 10 years in VR. And there is a lot of strength in other people's knowledge. There's a lot of things that over 10 years we've all been learning. There's a lot of rules in VR that don't apply to normal games, and we've been figuring it out as we go. There's a lot of knowledge there. So that would be, I'd just say, like, find your people.
Yeah, it is dangerous to go alone. I think that's amazing advice. And Richard, I'll kind of, last question of our roundtable, sort of the same. As you're looking forward to 2025 as our founder and CEO, what does that year look like for you in terms of growth, success? And then I would also love for you to share any advice for someone who maybe has a vision. I think you've done brilliantly executing a lot of these visions and bringing them into life, procuring a team that believes in the mission as well, and really getting it out there and making it real. So I'd love to hear about, your vision for 2025 and then advice for other visionaries.
Yeah, thanks. I'll take good. I don't know. I think I've got a ways to go before brilliant. Like, I'm working on it. If I to give myself one thing from a year ago, I'd be like, start reading the books I'm reading now a year ago. Some of which are just like thinking about management and leadership, and because I used to spend a lot of time just working on projects for myself, and it's a lot different. So I'm really in the past couple of weeks, I'm pretty excited about some of the things we're talking about with VR Singing Club. I saw a number of posts from this, like, here we asked a bunch of game developers what do they think about 2025, I just feel like there's this sentiment from folks and myself, but it's empowering. It's signing here from other folks. So like, if you, what was a quote that maybe was the best example? It was something like, I think I sometimes don't realize that people will tolerate more weird games than like I think they will. And we don't make necessarily weird games, but I think like, I think back to Nintendo and what they do, like just making something unique and novel and creative. Sometimes it's a little scary because we're a studio. We need to be sustainable to pay us to keep doing it. And you think, if it's too whimsical, if it's too strange, if it's too odd, if it's too out there, like maybe there's not enough people that are interested in it. But I feel like there's just a kind of a sentiment that it's like, let's swing for it. And people do like that kind of stuff if it's made with care and love. And so I'm excited about that with VR Singing Club. And then we do have another grant from the National Institute of Health and a lot of these different grading organizations. They love technically, I think it's an initialism, not an acronym. This is like the annoying dinner party comment I have, because I think an acronym is like NASA, where you actually say the word, and an initialism is like FBI, where you say the letters. But they love their whatevers, their acronyms, their initialisms. So we have another grant from the National Center for Comprehensive and Integrative Health with VR, and specifically looking in the intensive care unit. And we're some same collaborators, researchers, some of the other ones. Really excited about the people we're working with. We ran a preliminary pilot with 6 folks in the intensive care unit. We used an early version of VRTogether, the app, and the outcomes were really exciting. It's a small sample, but it was really positive outcomes so far. So we have a larger grant to extend that study with a lot more people, and we're running focus groups with a lot of experts to make sure that what we're building is something that they would use in the intensive care unit, because that's another side of it. It's like a nurse is a frontline practitioner in an intensive care unit. They're swamped with things that they've got to do. And even if there's great outcomes from this new application, if they can't find the time to administer it because it's too cumbersome and there's too many technological challenges, like it's not going to be utilized. And then nobody wins, because I'm sure that they would want to use it, but there's only so many minutes in a day, and there's so many things pulling at their attention. So super excited about that and how that fits into Games for Flourishing and our ideas around like wonder and joy and social connection. And then for the vision part, different people have different like skill sets. And so I feel like some people come into it different. Some people, like, they can create. So if they have an idea, they're like, I'm just going to go start building this thing myself, and they can do that. And that's how they get started. Other people don't necessarily know how to do that part of it, but they really have a very incredibly focused idea. And so they can start to like say, these are the steps I need to do. And they just start following the steps that they need to do. And a lot of times that might be finding other people who can do it. So one part is, I think, like trying to see what is somebody good at. So like if somebody is pretty good at creating, start creating it. And then, but also know that like eventually it's going to be something that you can't just do yourself. Yeah. Sometimes you can. And that is perfectly fine if somebody's like, I just want to do this myself. But, start creating, and then find people to like show them this thing. Like, here's this thing I made. But then there's also certainly a viable path, which is just, can I find other people and basically pitch them to use like entrepreneurial language, the idea, and one, you can see if it is interesting. Do people like it? Do people think the idea is interesting? And that validates it to a certain extent, that like, okay, people are responding to it. But then also it could potentially get those people that can help build that thing. But I think regardless of that, like the one thing is that separates all the ideas that are had, and then the manifestations of ideas into things that exist, is like a lot of it is the first step of just starting to do it. And I guess I would end by just saying, don't worry about doing it wrong, because like most of the time, even people who've done something well successful probably did like 90 things wrong or 90% of the thing wrong. Like, it's okay. You're probably going to do a bunch of stuff wrong along the way, and that's okay.
Nice. That is solid life advice as well. Don't be afraid to be wrong. I think that's really powerful, just getting it out there and seeing what resonates with people. Well, thank y'all so much for your time. And if this resonates with you, definitely stay up to date. I'll include the link to sign up for our email list. And you can follow us on our socials. Those will also be linked below. And stay tuned for upcoming episodes. We'll talk about what's going on with our studio. You'll get to meet some other team members, and we'll maybe even have a few special guests on. So thank y'all so much. We'll see you next time.